I'm Stephen Downs, and this is a model of personal learning, take 2. What I'm going to talk about, well, it's not all of that, obviously, but I'm going to talk about personal learning, and the best way to talk about personal learning is to talk about my personal learning. Now, my personal learning is different from your personal learning, is different from your neighbor's personal learning. This is what it looks like for me. It may be significant, it may be meaningless, but it's mine, and it's my story, and it's the things that I've done over the years, and it's meaningful to me. And it's because it's meaningful to me that it became possible at all. So when I talk about personal learning, on the one hand, I'm talking very much from personal sense, my own personal professional development, but I'm also talking about the sort of thing that anyone in any profession can do over time, and indeed does do, but just in a more scattered and less organized way in the past than will be possible in the future. This is the workflow, if you will. It says workflow, but for me it's more like a play flow. I've had a lot of fun through my career, but this is a rough outline. We could say this is the model if we want. Aggregate, remix, repurpose, feed forward. It's not actually original to me. I'm not sure it's even original to Aristotle. It's common sense in so many ways. You look at the various theories of learning, especially the various theories of social learning, you get some version of this. So the other part of the presentation is what goes along with this fairly obvious structure. What does this structure do? What does it mean? And that's what the rest of that is about. But, there's always a but in my talks. The title of the talk is A Model of Personal Learning. I am on record numerous times as having argued against the whole concept of models. And there's a whole argument there. So I always want to be cautious when I talk about models. We think about, here's the model, here's the structure, we apply this structure to work, to research, to whatever, and we're ready to go. But I have found, especially in research, but in life generally, the application of a model usually predetermines what is going to come out the other side. This is especially true with models in research. You read in various papers, I'm going to use such and such a theory as a lens to view the data or whatever. You're practically determining what you're going to get out the other side. We see that so much in education, where they go to do some research, and the research is based on, say, how well does this software mimic a classroom, or how well does this learning program improve test results, or are your employees achieving greater ROI using this learning mechanism? The conclusion is built into the model. And I always like to say, you always find what you're looking for. And that's what a model does. A model defines ahead of time what you're looking for, and then almost inevitably you'll find it. I like to work without models. The model, if ever it comes into play, is at the very end of the process. And when I'm in my late 80s, early 90s, or later, hopefully, I'll be lying down probably. Finally, I get it. Here is the model. That's when a model is useful, and you can make sense of it all. But in the process, I like serendipity. I like emergent phenomena, stuff that's unexpected. And that's what I've always sought to do in my own work. I've had lots of surprises over the years. The aforementioned MOOC is one of them. And that's what's missing in the standards-based approach, the models-based approach. David T. Jones from Australia characterized it as bad, which is really good. English is a strange language. Bad, bricolage, just the bringing together of things in a random, unplanned way. Affordances, I design technology not for outcomes, not for use cases, but for affordances. I like to build an environment where things are possible, but without predicting what people are going to do with that environment. Because in the history of technology, as I've seen it, the really interesting things that people have done with technology are the things the technology was not designed to do. For example, we built a $1 trillion global communications network linking together millions of expensive computers, consuming more electricity than any invention in the history of humanity. And we use this to send cat pictures. There you go. And then distribution. The idea not just of the bringing together, of the doing, but as Americans like to say, sharing out. I don't know why they say out, but the sharing, the distribution, the non-centeredness of things. I'll come back to that because that's a really important theme in all the work that I've done. A day in the life. So I'm going to begin talking a bit about my workflow, some of the tools and some other things. The idea here is it isn't a tools talk, but I want to kind of put you in my mindset and maybe see something in your daily life that's in my daily life. The Canadian comedian, and I've forgotten his name because he isn't really very good. It'll come to me, but I have Brent Butt, but that's a different person. But it's a similar name. His secret to comedy is find something in common with the audience, bring them around to your point of view, and then make them laugh at themselves. I think that's probably the most brilliant thing I've ever heard. And so that's kind of what I'm doing here. So sharing what I do, seeing maybe if you can see the world through the same lens, and then we'll have a good laugh together. My day begins with email. Just curious, how many of your days begin with email? Almost everyone. I was quipping yesterday with a group of us saying, if adults change technologies, or how did it go? If adults did not change technologies the way teens do, we would all still be using email. And I was making it like we don't use email, but we all use email. It's funny, it's the technology that you're introduced to when you start in technologies, the technology that defines that for you. This is the internet, email. This is the internet, the World Wide Web. I know there's stuff like mobile phones and stuff, and here it is, but that's for other people. My day begins with email. I run my own email server, so I don't use Google or anything like that. But my email looks pretty much like everybody else's email. More than half of it is spam. Even with spam detectors on, I use a system called EveryCloud these days. There's also PostLayer. So after this high-tech solution screens out the spam, about half of my email is still spam. And this is the best you can get. Then there's, I get various, they call it info mail, newsletters, things like that. Email from individuals, work-related email, email from the president of the NRC, which I delete without reading, things like that. But it starts my day. And then I'm kind of wide open after that. This is my start page. It's hand-woven HTML, no high-tech for me. But you can see, I've got my own stuff there. NRC, they're all very pleased to see all the NRC stuff because that's all the links on the intranet. Ironically, none of that works outside the office, so it's the least used part of my start page. Major League Baseball, because go Jays go. Probably means nothing here, but there you go, Blue Jays. I forgot to check and see if they won last night, and now it's going to bother me for the rest of the talk. Audio, photos, social networks, all the rest of it. The stuff that makes up a life online, right? Now when I'm zeroing in a bit more, I use the feeds. I know there's someone here from Curator, kind of the same idea. I've been using RSS feeds since there were RSS feeds, and I find them an incredibly reliable way of getting information that all of you write when you write blogs or other things. I can sign up to your RSS feed, and I get it all in my reader. This is Feedly. I used to use Google Reader, but Google canceled its reader, so tough on Google. I use Feedly. I also collect the list of all my feeds, and so, is this going to work? Sure it is. So these are the feeds that I read in a language called OPML. It's the list of all the feeds, and you can see there's a lot. And you might think, that's way too much. And it is too much, but I don't worry about that. It's not about consuming all of it. You can't consume all of anything. I've tried, but you can't. But the idea here is to make sure I'm getting enough of a snapshot of the world. When I open up my feed reader, in a sense, it's pretty random. I don't know what's going to be at the top. There are various magazines that publish an article every hour to make sure they're at the top. But I don't read those a whole lot. But I make sure, I see the headline, so that's nice. Still scrolling through this. What's nice about OPML is, and you have the link there, you can get that OPML file, you enter it into your own Feedly, you are now subscribing to everything that I've subscribed to. You don't even need to know what it is, there it is. So I've shared all of my daily reading habits with you. And it was easy. It was all I had to do was click a link. And all you have to do is click a link and then enter it into Feedly later on. Or whatever feed reader you use. There's not as many. There's one called the Old Reader, which is I'm told very nice, but I had to pick one. So what I do is I flag the stuff that's interesting to me. I use Pocket. I used to use Delicious. Delicious is now dead, sadly. But I use Pocket, and what I've done, it's really very simple. So here's my browser. So let's go to a web page on my browser. I have an extension in the browser. You can put it in Chrome or Firefox or whatever, not Edge. And I just click on the little pocket and it saves the page, which is really very handy for me. And then after that, I go to this page, Get Pocket. Now, I thought I could share this, or as the Americans would say, share this out to people, but I can't. But it's still really useful for me because now these are the things in the last little while that I've saved to Pocket. So there you go, and it's really very handy. This is a searchable list, and I can, it's not a library. I don't really treat this as permanent because look what happened to Delicious, but it's a really handy staging site. And you'll find most people do that in one way or another. They'll stage stuff. They might keep a bibliography or something like that. So I thought, I used to use Facebook, but I've killed my Facebook account. You should too. I killed it when they started throwing advertisements at me, and actually the day that they announced that they were developing technology to defeat ad blocking on Firefox and Chrome was the day I turned off my Facebook. Because if you're blowing up my ad block, I don't want to have anything to do with you. Twitter's getting the same way. They're starting to throw advertisements at me. I'm starting to get annoyed. And so I probably won't be using Twitter indefinitely. I'm sorry, all you people who love Twitter out there in the Twitter sphere. I use LinkedIn, sort of. I know a lot of professionals use it. LinkedIn is in danger of becoming very expensive very quickly. It's owned by Microsoft, of course, and it's acquired lynda.com, which is a learning management system. So now they've drawn the connection from software to social network and job finding and all of that to learning. And so they've created their, I was going to say vertical infrastructure with a horizontal metaphor, but they've created this, but it's really expensive. I tried it out for a month, and it's like something, I forget the exact amount, but it's like about $30 a month, which is way more than I'm ever going to spend for a social network. Even if I need a job, I'm probably not going to spend that because there are too many free alternatives out there. But it's very popular. And then down here, everybody forgets about it, so I thought I'd throw it in, is Google+, which still exists. And I use it for baseball pictures and stuff. It's about the level of content on Google+. But I'm much more interested in the newer distributed social networks. I've been using primarily Mastodon, Mastodon. Everybody wants to put an A in there, but there's no A. Which is it's like Twitter. And you can see the display looks like TweetDeck, which I never like, so I don't like the display at all. But the idea is there is not one single central Mastodon server. There is one called mastodon.social, but it's closed. You can't create an account on it anymore. But there are various other Mastodon servers. There's a whole network of them now. And if you want, you can create your own Mastodon server. So you don't need to depend on Mastodon at all. They can never convert this into an advertising service. It's free open source software. You run the network. You run your instance. You can block people from following you if you want. You can control what happens on your Mastodon instance. It belongs to you. That's my kind of social network. People have been working towards this for a long time. Diaspora was an early attempt. It was funded through Kickstarter. I actually gave them money that is now gone. App.net was another one, same sort of concept. I gave them money too, money that is now gone. So I learned this time I didn't give Mastodon anything and it might succeed. But there's a shift taking place. There's a really important shift, and it's under the radar still, from these centralized services like Twitter, Facebook, Google+, whatever, LinkedIn, to these distributed systems. Very early days. Maybe it'll fail. Maybe it won't. Part of my day consists of learning. Well, all of my day consists of learning, but part of my day consists of learning properly, so-called. So I threw a couple of things in here. Every once in a while, I'll take an online course, not a lot. That's Codecademy. I learned Python, basic Python, on Codecademy. I'm now getting ready to learn Ruby. I kind of know Ruby already, but Codecademy is nice. It steps you through. What I really like about it is it's not a textbook. It's they give you basically a coding area and some hints. You write your code. And you learn how to write Python, or you learn how to write Ruby or whatever by writing Python or writing Ruby. And it either works or it doesn't. Software is wonderful that way. For more free-form learning of programming, which I do a fair bit of, Stack Overflow is great. Stack Overflow, the way you use Stack Overflow is you don't go to Stack Overflow. What you do is you type a question into Google. Why won't my Perl array index to -1? Or some such thing. Type that into Google. A Stack Overflow page comes up in Google. You go to that page because somebody has asked that very question, and then all of the answers are listed under the question, and people vote them up according to how good the answer is. And usually one of the answers in the top 2 or 3 is the answer you need. You can learn to program from scratch using nothing but Stack Overflow, because the questions range from the really basic to the really obscure. Now it's the slide with webinars and things. So, every once in a while I'll go to a webinar. Some of them are internal, in-house. They're run on Adobe Connect or WebEx or whatever, software that I can't afford. Others are run by, Athabasca University runs their CIDR, Center for Internet and Distance Education and Research, or something like that. They run their regular webinars. Those are quite good. Various other webinars. We're doing a webinar right now. There may actually be people watching us online through YouTube Live. We'll talk about that in a second. And then, so that's my gathering of content. I have gathered. I have gone into the world and harvested the things that I need. I feel like a hunter, a mighty hunter. And now I save it. And this is Grasshopper. This is software that I've been working on for 20 years. It'll be done soon. I write a lot of software, but I use software as a scratch pad for ideas, basically. So I don't really write commercial software. I write software to try to put into tangible form the ideas that I have. A lot of software gets written that way. It's like they say about open source. Most open source exists because some programmer needed to scratch an itch. They needed to do something and there wasn't software to do it, so they wrote something. And Grasshopper is that for me. I use Grasshopper for a whole bunch of things. The first use that I made out of it was to save links, resources that I found interesting, into a database. When I first built Grasshopper, I actually built a database, which I've since learned is a really stupid thing to do. And now I use a database that other people built, and it works. But I used it like bookmarks. And because I had different browsers in different places, and I couldn't store all my bookmarks in one place, so I wrote this to store all my bookmarks. And over time, it's evolved. So Grasshopper is open source. Here's the website for it. Rod Savoie created the logo, and I really like it. It's available on GitHub. There it is, free. If you can make it work, great, you can use it. I'm just kidding a little bit. I'm in the process of making this better so that it'll be much more usable. Yeah, you've made it work, haven't you? Yeah, so there is at least one other person in the world who has made it work. I've been putting stuff into my website for a long time, beginning in the 1990s and continuing through to, this is from the talk in Mexico City, but I've added another couple of hundred since then. So that's about 28,000 posts in that time. Each post is somewhere between 100 and 300 words. There's nothing that focuses you into writing clearly than restricting the length of your essays to 100 to 300 words. You can say a lot in that space, but you can't dither. So you have to make the point really quickly. This has been my learning, right? I have read and commented on 28,000 items having to do with distance learning, new instructional media, etc. And I have them all in my database. To me, now, it's an incredible resource. And I built it all by myself. Everybody does that to more or less a degree, but not with the sort of single-minded purpose that I have. And that leads us to, now, the first kind of reflection of the talk. So we'll leave my day in the life aside for a moment and see what comes out of all of that. What has come out of all of that for me is the concept of the personal learning environment. This is a concept that's been around for 10 years. I remember some of the early discussions that took place in Britain in 2006, 2007. Nobody's actually successfully built one yet. So, of course, it's become a passion project of mine to actually try to build it. But here's the concept. So, the personal learning environment is an application just for you or just for me. In that way, it's very similar to email. I have my own email reader. I don't use someone else's. Some people can go to Google Mail if they want. That's okay. Others go to Outlook or whatever. Others use Thunderbird. But, you know, it's your email. It's not your email which you share with 5 of your friends. Or your web browser. It's your web browser. Your bookmarks, your theming, whatever. A lot of software is like that. A lot of things are like that. It's your phone. You don't share your phone with your neighbor. Or probably shouldn't anyways, right? Personal. So at the center is the personal learning environment. And then the personal learning environment connects to all the stuff that you need. And I've picked a few examples here. Connects to a learning management system. Connects to a simulation. Connects to a MOOC. Connects to a chat room. Connects to Blogger or an intranet or whatever else you can think of. Connects to Diaspora or Mastodon. Connects to, well, think of it, it connects to it. The big question, of course, is, well, there's numerous questions. But the big question is how? How do you pull this off? Because they're all different technologies. Some of them, like Facebook, really, really, really don't want you to use them like this. They want you to go to Facebook, stay there, and never leave, right? This goes completely against that idea. Others sort of make it easy, sort of make it hard. Others are way too easy, and you just get overflowed with content. It really varies. And of course, the standards change all the time. Set up an API with Bing, works fine. Bing says, oh, we're terminating our search API. Sorry, too bad. So that's the world of the internet these days. Very arbitrary, very capricious. It's okay if you can write software, but if you can't, these things like break your applications. And that's, of course, the purpose. What is a PLE? So there's different ways, different approaches, different answers to the questions that can be asked. Some of the key questions. What information should it record? Is it like learning activity recording, so you record everything you've ever read? Or is it just the highlights? If you receive a tweet from a friend, do you record that? These are decisions that somehow need to be made. Who owns the data in a personal learning environment? We know who owns the data in a learning management system or in Facebook, someone else, right? Not us. Who owns the data in a personal learning environment? Ideally, should be us. Key question, what would it do? You have a personal learning environment, why? You have a learning management system, why? You have email, why? What do you want the thing to do? There's going to be as many answers to that question as there are people. And where exactly do you put your personal learning environment? Do you put it on your laptop? Do you put it on your phone? Do you put it in the cloud? Do you put it on the company intranet? Or all of the above? I've tried for all of the above. People tell me, no, it's impossible, you can't do it. I still think you can. But so that's me and my personal learning environment, which you should recognize from before. And one of the major things I use it to do is to connect to people, other people. And the idea is each person should have their own personal learning environment, just like each person has their own email. Same thing, only better, right? So via a simulation, say, I might connect with this person. Via a chat room, I might connect with that person. So the way these personal learning environments ought to work, I say ought to because, again, nobody's actually built one of these things yet, is to use the services that are out there on the internet to connect with, work with, cooperate with, etc., other people, to do stuff, whatever that stuff might be. Even taking it further, now we can add the mix of social networks in there, add email in there, add Facebook for direct person-to-person connections as well. And possibly even, although it seems overkill at this point, direct PLE to PLE connection. I don't know if it's worth the time to do that because we got so many ways of communicating with each other. There's really not a need to write another one. What there is a need to do is to allow all of them to work in a single network, because right now that network is broken. Your SMS doesn't work with your email doesn't work with Facebook, really. Facebook doesn't work with Twitter at all, except for a little bit of reblogging, etc. What are the properties of the network? Big question number one, and people always ask me this first off, how do people find each other in the personal learning environment network? And the answer to that question is all the other services that people are already connected to. If you can convince, and it's a big if you can convince Facebook and LinkedIn, etc., to allow you to list your own list of contacts, then you can use that list to connect to people with your personal learning environment network. Of course, these social networks do not want you to list your friends. They work very hard to prevent that. But there are not so legal ways of getting your list of friends out of your social networks. How do they communicate? What are the mechanisms? One of the things that killed Diaspora when it came out was it wasn't sufficiently secure. It was pretty secure, but we're talking person-to-person communications on the internet. They've got to be super secure, way more secure than email. Otherwise, you get spoofers, you get spammers, you get malware and viruses, you got all kinds of garbage in your communications network, and harmful garbage. So these things have to be secure. There's a whole layer of work being done in that area. Software like Keybase, for example, or a lot of the Bitcoin stuff, blockchain stuff, Ethereum kind of networks, to try to build that network of security that's needed to secure absolutely person-to-person communication. Again, once we have this, a lot of what the social networks give us will be useless, really. How does a single personal learning environment work with these other services? Do we use technology called OAuth? It's pretty good technology. It allows us to send data back and forth with these things, but is it secure enough, right? Is it flexible enough to send the right kind of data? Do we always need that kind of overhead? I just shared with you my OPML file with all my feeds. We don't need security on that. I just put it on the web. You can use it or not. So how do you set it up so that you have the right security for the right application? Do you need centralized registries? Me, I'm a decentralizer. I think these things should always be decentralized. A centralized point is a centralized point of failure. If Facebook goes down, if the servers at Facebook goes down, people are going to lose it out there. But if you have a decentralized network, there's no way for the whole network to go down. Finally, why a personal learning environment? What's the value proposition? Now, this isn't just money, right? You talk to business people, right? They say, what's the value proposition of your software? They expect an answer in dollars and cents, right? It'll save on overhead, it'll increase efficiency of output, etc. But we're not talking about companies using these things. And this is where I ran into trouble with my employer. My market isn't companies, my market isn't institutions. In other words, my market isn't big things that have lots of money. My market is people. Mostly they don't have money, sign of the times. But I think it's people who are going to be using these things, individual people who will eventually leverage them for academic or corporate purposes, but ultimately they will be the ones who are in control. And now your value proposition changes. It's not just, can you earn more? Does it cost less? It's not even bigger, faster, better. It's more about, does it give you satisfaction? Does it make you happy? Does it give you good experiences, good memories? Did you use the system to organize a fun outing or a camp or whatever? That sort of thing is going to matter in many ways a lot more than the financial benefits. Again, though, they're going to be different for every person. You can't write a single value proposition for a personal learning environment. I've tried. Finally, what are you going to do? I'm about to shift into personalization versus personal learning. Finally get to the topic of this talk. But I want to emphasize, education is not a search problem. If you go to a commercial software vendor talk or whatever, and they say, our system will help you find or curate or evaluate or get the best learning resources, they are solving the wrong problem. And here's why. Quality of the learning resource really matters, I don't want to say quite only if, but really matters only if you really didn't want that learning resource in the first place and kind of have to be conned into using it. If you are really interested in what you're learning about, really engaged, you'll make do with anything. You will make do with marks on a rock. You will make do with lossy, low-quality video that you can hardly understand if it solves your problem, right? You will make do with Stack Overflow, which, admit it, it's a terrible interface, but it works. Education is not a search problem. Google has solved the search problem, frankly. And you can find the answer to anything you want on Google. So if education is not a search problem, what is it we're up to with this technology? Now I'll tell you the story. Begins with making. Education is to a large degree a making problem. This is my, come on. That's that, right? This computer is in many senses my personal learning environment. These are the various tools that I use to make things. Yes, it's Windows 10. I know, it's boring, it's Microsoft. But it works really well, and I can customize this, and I don't need to worry that Microsoft is going to improve my software by deleting features. I use this to make. I make a lot of things with this computer. I make photographs with Lightroom. I like Lightroom. And now Lightroom is a cloud-based technology, which means I can actually afford Lightroom. Up until a year or two ago, I couldn't afford it. It was for professionals. Now, very affordable. So I use the cloud edition of Adobe Lightroom. I make audio. Usually I'm recording audio as I'm giving this talk, but I'm doing the video, and we got more video, so I don't actually have the audio recorder running. But this is Audacity. Audacity makes audio. I just turn it on, and it'll record off the camera. Or even better, I love this, if I set up this computer to do stereo mix, so I'm capturing the sounds from the computer, like, say, the radio station, like CBC, Canada Live, concerts every Friday at 2 p.m. Then I can use Audacity to record those. It's like when I was a teenager, and my brilliant, brilliant plan was to take my radio and my cassette recorder and put a plug into the line out of the radio and into the line in of the cassette recorder, and then hit record. And I was recording my own music. It was so cool. That's what I do with this. Only now it's illegal. So I don't share it. So don't tell anyone. We'll keep that a secret, okay? Especially since CBC doesn't have an archive of Canada Live. So the only way to actually, never mind. They don't need to know. Making Google Docs. I use Google Docs a lot. I write my own papers in Google Docs. I write reports and other things in Google Docs. What I really like is that I can share my Google Docs just by sharing the address, and then whoever I'm writing the report for can come into that very document and start writing it with me. I did a project with Canada School of Public Service recently. We had all of them and all of us working on a Google Doc to create a roadmap for their next 3 years development. Perfect. Over here on the right, this is Learning Technology Standards Committee from IEEE using Google Docs to run one of its meetings. Awesome. That's wonderful. How could you ask for more than that? Making publications, making textbooks, making encyclopedias. Rebus is a community that's collectively authoring textbooks now. I've signed up for the philosophy, the intro philosophy textbook. I might edit a chapter, I might not. I don't know. There's no rule about whether you participate or not. There's the open textbook library. There's open journal systems from the Public Knowledge Project out of Simon Fraser University. All kinds of collective and cooperative writing tools out there. Making is a big part of this environment. Making, XSplit. I'm making movies right now, and not through that camera, through this camera. I'm using right now XSplit, and let's see if it's working. So there it is. So this right here is me recording this talk. You can't really tell just because of the way I'm doing on the left-hand side the camera input, on the right-hand side the screen input. So that's showing my slides, or if I go to a website, it's showing that. So people right now, hopefully one anyways, are watching this broadcast live on YouTube. So we're webcasting it at the same time. And of course, it's creating the video recording, and we'll have that for the future for as long as YouTube lasts, which, knowing Google, could be to tomorrow, or it could be 5 years, who knows. I always save all the videos anyways. So I'm making movies. This camera I borrowed, so it was free. The XSplit software cost me about $175. The main thing I need, of course, is a computer to run it on. I'm doing high quality, it's pretty high quality, video production for less than $200. Sharing. I have my own radio station. It's not on air at the moment. I kept it on air for years and years and years. I'll probably turn it back on. Right now it's a podcast. So the way I've set it up, you remember my OPML with RSS? I have a list of RSS feeds where the author of the feeds that I subscribe to, they create podcasts, which are MP3 files. They're audio files. And Grasshopper, which does everything for me, gets those, gets the link to the audio files, and creates a podcast out of that, which I call Ed Radio. And you can subscribe to Ed Radio podcast. Just go to the Ed Radio page. You get new educational content every day. I used to run it as a live radio station on Shoutcast, which cost me about $30 a month, give or take. So again, very inexpensive. I could have had 100 listeners at any given time listening to my, my podcasts, and I could cut in with live broadcasts, which I did. But my average listenership was 0. So after 10 years, I decided maybe I shouldn't be running a radio station with 0 listeners. But I'm going to start again, because why not? Sharing my blogs, art blog, regular blog, and I have various other blogs as well, because why not? Sharing, Slideshare. This presentation, these slides, the audio from this presentation, all of that will be put together and will combine to form, oh, I don't have it. Where is it? Here it is. A presentation page, and I have an archive of all of my presentations. Most people don't do this, and my question is, why not? It's craziness. Again, Grasshopper does this for me. But so usually there's a video as well as the slides. But so the slides are on Slideshare. There you go. This is a different talk, etc. You can download the audio and so on. And so I have a page for every one of my talks. Each page is like a little bit of my personal learning environment. My personal learning environment is like a portfolio system for me as well. Part of the reason I get great gigs like this one is that people can see all of my previous talks, and the good ones and the bad ones, because sometimes you're going to get a bad talk if you bring in a speaker. They can see them all, and they can see for themselves what the talk's going to be like. Or, if they're interested, they can find out what my ideas are and maybe learn from that. What I'm describing is really, in some important ways, a new learning paradigm. The traditional paradigm, the content-based paradigm, is all about path and course, sequence of studies, prerequisite, covering the subject, going through levels, leveling up, getting badges. You can be first in your class, last in your class, working toward learning objectives, being led through the content. To me, all of that is completely antithetical to the way I learn, and indeed the way all of you learn, except when you're in a class. This is the model that I prefer, where I think of learning as an environment or a field. I think of it as mapping a terrain. I think of it as discovery, as inquiry. I think of it as maybe construction, maybe grouping and clustering together. We'll go through the territory as a group. It can be shared, it can be centered. A lot of the learning is emergent. It's not actually in the content at all. But the environment, it's not about the content. It's about the experience of exploring the content. What is learned isn't the geography. What is learned is what you learn from the geography, which might be anything. Which is how we ended up building the original MOOCs. The original MOOC is a map. It's an environment. It's a network. It's a group of people connected together, creating an environment which they will then collectively explore with each other. Which brings us to personalization. And the point of this talk, with about less than 5 minutes to go. You notice how I subtly acknowledge the sign from the back of the room, with nobody noticing me do that. Personalization. Personalization is characterized, not always, but typically by things like rule-based events. Rules are big in personalization. And user models and adaptive learning. They treat learning as a search problem. And what is the object of the search? To get the content. Why do you want to get the content? So that you can remember it, because that's the objective. I think there's two approaches to learning. On the one hand, there's the content-based approach. Boo, hiss. On the other hand, there's the practice-based approach. Yay, cheers. The content-based approach begins with this ideal state of knowing that you are attempting to achieve, and you go through time, and eventually somebody will test you to see whether you have achieved that ideal state. The practice-based approach is a desired state that I define. This is what I want to do, not some ideal state that the corporation or the state or whatever wants me to do. Something I want to do. I want to learn photography. I want to write Perl, etc. I try to do it because I don't read the instructions. I just try to do it. And that produces a result. Usually failure, but that's okay, because somebody is there to help me, and then I get to try again. And so that's what happens. I iterate on my practice instead of being corrected by a tester. Each iteration is an opportunity, not a gap. It's me getting better, not me correcting my failures. The content-based approach views learning as though we're a library of content to be mastered. You must learn everything. I view learning as an environment based on affordances, things we could do, but we don't have to do, opportunities, serendipity. Personalized learning, the learning management system or the institution will do all the learning for you. Learning is easy. Personal learning, you do it for yourself. It's hard, it's frustrating, but it's learning you want to do, creating your own personal portfolio, your own personal learning experience, or whatever. And your outcomes in this, not certification, not badges or credentials, but rather your presence in a network. You are creating something in yourself that is manifest through your interactions with other people through your personal learning environment. Some people talk about extended cognition, right? Some people talk about your cognitive processes taking place in the network itself. Now, I don't have a whole lot of time, I have no time in fact, to talk about cloud environments, but that's where all of this is going to happen. People who are selling server-based software right now are going to be replaced by easily accessible cloud-based services. And that's where the making is going to happen again. That's where these applications, including Grasshopper, are going to be available. And that's where even your records, like your learning record store, are going to be. And that's the end of my talk. So thank you, and I'm sorry I went a little bit over.